Good afternoon. It is day 3 of sentencing of Nikolas Cruz, the confessed Parkland shooter. I'm Janine Stanwood, along with our legal analyst, David Weinstein. This has been quite a morning. We've heard from teachers and students who were there that day.
And we expect to hear more of the same this afternoon. Again, setting the stage in the minds of the jurors for what actually took place on that day. We've all heard about it. Now they're hearing about it, seeing about it.
The testimony
Let's take a listen. This is the defense.
asked to give regarding the long-term effects of their injuries or the number of surgeries that they had. We are concerned that there might be an attempted murder victim testifying this afternoon that intends to show the jury the wounds. That is not relevant to put the crime in context or prove an aggravating factor. Mr. Cruz has pled to 34 counts, 17 of them attempted murder. So he has admitted to shooting them with his firearm. And even if this court found some relevance to whether they still have pains from it or how many surgeries, the probative value of that is far outweighed by the prejudice. There's really no, it doesn't go to prove any aggravating factor.
So you don't think the fact that somebody shot in the stomach, the lung, and the leg, and can't walk is not probative of the aggravating factors for the other victims?
Well, Mr. Cruz has already pled guilty, so that has been established.
But the fact that what somebody else endured, for example, one of the witnesses today testified that she was shot in the stomach, in the lung, and I think both of her legs, and you're arguing that that's not probative to an aggravator?
No, I'm not arguing that. What I'm arguing is that would be what you just said. If that's what they testified to, where they were shot, that's fine. But then to go further into what they still feel today, sometimes I still have pain from it, or showing the jury their injuries. Those things are not probative to prove any aggravating factor. The aggravating factor is that it was a contemporaneous felony, which he has already pled to, and they have testified to in simply saying, I was shot with his firearm. So it's not relevant, it's not probative, and any prejudice far outweighs that.
Your Honor, I understand Ms. Curtis's argument. However, it's not just the aggravating factor that the jury has to consider. It's the weight. It's the weight that the jury will give to each of these aggravating factors. These were not grazed wounds. These were gunshot wounds. And in the matter of Ms. Wilford, she was, as you correctly pointed out, Your Honor, she was shot 4 times. They were not grazed wounds. And yes, she had long-term effects from those, not just injuries, but gunshot wounds. And so it goes to weight as to these aggravating factors. We don't have to just show that there is an aggravating factor. We have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And we have to show that there's weight, significant weight that's attached to it, because we are limited by statute as to how many aggravating factors, and in this case there are 7.
Ian, there's some feedback. Try again. Sorry, that's like a dog whistle or something.
Okay. We are limited by statute as to how many aggravating factors we can prove. There are 7 in this case. And after we prove those beyond a reasonable doubt, the jury has to attach weight. Not just look at how many aggravating factors there are in relation to how many mitigating circumstances that only have to be proven by the greater weight of the evidence. We have to prove ours beyond a reasonable doubt, and the jury has to weigh them. These are weighty. We are showing the weight that should be accorded these aggravating factors. And yes, it is relevant for the jury to know that these aren't just grazed wounds. Some of these people escaped within an inch of their lives, Your Honor, and it is entirely relevant for those questions to be asked. And I would point out that the record will speak for itself, because there has not been an inordinate amount of questions or time devoted to that topic. The questions and the record will reflect that these witnesses have been put on, quickly asked questions, and gotten off the stand. We have not belabored any of these points. We're merely putting on these witnesses and going to their injuries and if they've had any long-term effects, to go to the weight of their injuries the weight of the aggravators for the jury to consider. And there should be no restriction on the state's ability to bring out that evidence in a penalty phase proceeding where the whole ball game is about aggravation and what the defense can put on in mitigation.
Great. Is there anything else as far as this argument goes?
Judge, I would say that the fact that he pled guilty has already proven that aggravator beyond the reasonable doubt.
That may be your point of view, but that doesn't, there's no, you can't determine the amount of evidence that the state can put on if it goes to if it's probative of an issue in the case. In other words, it might not be good for your side, but if the state wants to put it on, I don't know any rule that says there's a limit to how much probative evidence that they can set forth if it goes to a material issue that's going to be decided.
Well, Judge, there are cases that limit what can be presented in a sentencing phase only. Evidence necessary to familiarize the jury with the underlying facts and to prove an aggravator.
Because as far as I know, the witnesses that are testifying to the extent of their injuries in the indictment, they're charged not only with an attempted murder in the first degree, but that the discharge of the firearm inflicted great bodily harm.
Right.
So you're saying the case law says that they can put on evidence of the crime. Well, that's one of the elements of the particular crime as it relates to the particular victim.
Right, but given that Mr. Cruz has pled guilty and admitted to doing all of that, the prejudice outweighs the probative value in this particular case. It's not necessary to put the crime in context. And the proof of the aggravator has already been established.
Okay, respectfully, I disagree, and I'm going to deny your motion and eliminate as to that issue.
Okay. The other motion limit I have is regard to a witness that I believe the state may be calling more towards the end of the day. So if you want to save that one for the right before the break,
Sure.
or after the break, we could do that.
Sure, like mid-afternoon, you mean?
The mid-afternoon break.
Okay,
yes,
that
ma'am.
would be good, because the jurors
Okay,
are
thank you.
already lined up. Mr. Sachs, as opposed to me telling you to call your next witness, I'm just gonna have you call the next witness so that when you run out of witnesses for the morning or the afternoon, or then you can let me know, as opposed to me telling you to call your next witness and then
Okay,
you
so-
say, we don't have any more for the day.
I'll be happy to do that. I just didn't want to be rude.
No, I know, normally I say state, call your next witness,
Right.
but under these circumstances, because there's so many witnesses and you know how many you're calling and I don't.
I don't mind. I just
Okay.
didn't want to
No, it's not,
usurp the court's ability to say what's going to happen next.
not a problem at all.
Okay. I'm good.
Okay, let's bring in the jury, please, thank you.
So briefly, the defense had an objection. They said, listen, we're hearing from these witnesses, from these victims. They're talking about the long-term effects. We don't need to hear all of that because just the fact that they were shot and that the defendant pleaded guilty, that's already an aggravating factor.
Correct. They want to prevent the state from asking these witnesses, as we heard from Ms. Wilford, what the extent of her continuing lingering pain and suffering is. The state's response is, we're entitled to do that because it's not just an aggravating factor, but it allows the jury to weigh just how great of an aggravator that factor is. And they're entitled to hear it. And as they pointed out, they limited the number of questions they were asking. They didn't dwell, they didn't linger on it. Judge agreed with them, and for purposes of the record, the defense has preserved their objection. And Court of Appeals will have to decide whether that was one that was worth sustaining or objecting.
And now we move forward to witness number 30 being called by the state.
We're going to get started with our afternoon session. State, go ahead and call your next witness.
Thank you. Stacy Lapel, please. Thank you, sir.
please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you will give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you. You can put your hand on and be seated, please. Please speak into the microphone and state your full name and spell your last name.
Stacy Lippel, Lippel.
And your occupation, ma'am?
I'm a teacher,
And how long have you been a teacher?
16 years,
And where do you presently teach?
Stoneman Douglas High School,
And how long have you taught at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School?
10 years.
Okay. Where is Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School?
It's in Parkland,
And where? Where? Do you know the address?
5901 Pine Island Road.
Okay. And it's bordered by the Sawgrass and Homburg, right?
Correct.
And Carl Ridge Drive to the west.
Right.
Okay. So were you assigned to a particular classroom?
Yes, I was in room 1255.
So on Wednesday, February the 14th, 2018, you were in classroom 1255.
I
right?
was.
Prior to Wednesday, February the 14th, 2018, how long have you been in that class? I almost said courtroom, that classroom.
That was my second year in that classroom.
Okay. So I'm going to show you State's Exhibit marked 4I for identification. It's a diagram. And I'll take a look at that and see if you recognize that as the third floor of the 1200 building.
I do.
Okay. And does it show your classroom?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to offer State's Exhibit 4I.
Is there any objection?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Without objection, State's Exhibit 4I for identification will be received as State's 67.
Okay, Ms. LaPel, I want to show you now State's Exhibit 67. Can you see if I can work this? Not bad. Can you see that?
Yes,
Okay. And if you know how to work the?
I do.
Okay, cool. Could you mark where your classroom is? Okay. And do you know who Scott Beagle is?
I do.
Who is he?
He was a teacher whose classroom was right next to mine.
And could you draw with a different color, maybe, where his classroom was? And do you know who Ernest Rospirsky is?
I do.
And do you know who is he?
He's also a teacher at Stoneman Douglas High School.
Okay, do you remember where his classroom was?
I'm not sure.
Okay,
It was either 1249 or 1250.
okay. All right, that's fine. Okay. Just take that off. Okay, so let me take you to Wednesday, February the 14th, 2018. Fourth period. Would you please tell us what happened?
We were almost finished with our fourth period class. I was teaching creative writing, which is a mixed class, 9th through 12th graders. And around 2:20, I heard a popping sound, which was, to me, it sounded like it was coming from outside to the east of our building. It was kind of low and muted. In a kind of, my classroom, we had about 38 kids in the class, so there was a lot of noise, just talking and some music. And so the sound was muted, but it caused us to pause.
I forgot to ask you, what are you teaching?
English and creative writing.
Okay, anything particular that you were teaching on this particular fourth period class?
We were writing love letters, or love to hate letters.
Okay, and your classroom, it's the second one, you know, based on the diagram, from the east side on the north side of the hall. Am I
Correct.
describing that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so go ahead, you were.
So we were busy, we heard a popping sound, caused us to pause, and didn't sound menacing really in any way, but just kind of caused us to sort of stop. But in my mind, I thought it could be firecrackers because, it was Valentine's Day, people had balloons and they could be popping. Or the first thought really that came to my mind was that something fell over, a computer cart with computers, and it just sounded like metal on metal. But again, very muted.
Do each classroom have computer carts? All the kids have computers now, right? So
Right. Then most classrooms had their own computer cart.
Okay. So go ahead. What happens then?
So after that, we resumed. Some kids were kind of quieted down a little bit. I think I heard popping sounds again. I don't quite remember because simultaneously the fire alarm went off. And the fire alarm in the 1200 building is piercing. And so that sort of superseded anything else that maybe we had heard before. So I grabbed my emergency folder and my phone, and I yelled over the noise and motioned for everybody to leave the classroom and meet up where we normally meet up.
And where do you normally meet for?
We'll usually meet in by the fence on Holmberg Road, like inside the fence.
Okay.
We're all assigned to different spaces.
So when you go, when you leave for a fire drill, you go out the east stairwell?
Right, so every classroom goes a different route. In our
Right.
classroom, we would go to the east.
East, because you're 2 classrooms from
Right.
the stairwell, right?
Correct.
Okay. Was this the first time you heard the fire alarm that day?
No, we actually had a fire drill, I guess a planned drill, a second period that day.
Okay, so this is the second time you're hearing a fire
Right,
alarm.
and so also at that moment, I thought maybe it was firecrackers, and that set off the fire alarm. To me, it wasn't a drill because it was at the end of the school day, and it didn't make any sense for them to have a drill at the end of the school day.
Okay.
So I figured it was either an alarm pull that maybe a student pulled, or a prank, or whatever it was. But in any case, we evacuated because there was no reason not to evacuate. So I waited for every child to get out. Well, the hall sort of fills up very quickly, so our hall was filling up with students pretty quickly. And so I would say there was maybe a classroom full of kids in front of my class. So everybody got out. I was the last one out. And I made sure the door was locked behind me. They didn't lock automatically, but I just double checked that the door was locked. And I started walking behind my students. And so kind of like neck and neck with me was Scott Beagle.
Scott Beagle.
He was on one side, and then another teacher was on the other side. And I can't remember his name now. I'm sorry. So we start walking towards the stairwell, which is about 20 feet from my classroom. Maybe I walked about 2 feet, and I heard the screams before I heard anything else. So all of a sudden, I hear kids screaming, and then there was a log jam right before the stairwell. No one was moving. The crowd started moving backwards towards me. And so as that was happening, I heard gunshots. It wasn't really connecting that it was gunshots. It was just very, very loud. So I turned very quickly, walked straight to my classroom, unlocked the door, and then kind of simultaneously, I locked it back in the position to make sure it was locked when I was able to close it. So I opened my door, and kids started running. They were screaming, they were running. It was extremely loud, chaotic. Heard shots, the fire alarm was still going off, and everyone was just kind of running in a haphazard way.
Okay. And then what?
I got my door open, students started just running into whatever classroom they could run into.
So students that weren't assigned to your class were also running into
Yes,
the
yes.
Okay.
So my door opened, so I was facing the east. And then I saw Scott right in front of me, his door opens the opposite way.
Is there anything between, you're on the north side, is there anything between your classrooms, like on the south side, there's a partition between?
No partition.
There's no partition like it exists?
Right.
No? Oh, okay.
We're in an alcove together.
Right, so it's just flush doors, right?
Right.
Okay.
So after what seemed like a long time, but it really wasn't, I saw the shooter emerge from the stairwell. So I just sort of saw him walk, and my memory is that he was standing in front of the stairwell, sort of splaying the rifle back and forth. And it was just shot after shot after shot. It just never stopped. Kids were running, kids kept coming into my classroom. My door was open, and there was a point where I don't remember why or when or how I decided to close my door, but I grabbed the handles of my door to pull it closed. And when I did that, I felt like a ping and like a heat brush against my arm. And as I'm doing that, I know I could see Scott from my peripheral, and so I yelled at him to close his door. And so as I'm closing my door, I'm just kind of hanging on to that handle really, really tight, hung on to it as it closed, waited there a couple of beats, and then I ran over to the corner where my students were hiding.
Okay. Did any students still outside your door, or did you get them all in?
I got them all in.
Okay. And what'd you see about Scott? Did you, after you yelled, close your door, Scott, anything?
No idea.
How close did you get to the shooter?
He was about 20 feet from me, but moving in.
And-
He
and
was
what did
walking
the-
towards me.
And what did the rifle, if you had a chance to look, what did the rifle look like?
It was long and black.
Okay. All right. So you go into your classroom and you run to where the kids are hiding, right?
Right.
So then what happens?
Soon as I got there, within seconds, I heard shots next door, very loud, in succession, and then immediately shots were fired through the glass panel of my door.
Okay.
Maybe 3 or 4.
Anybody hit in your classroom?
No.
Okay. Then what happened?
We were all adjacent to the door, so it was adjacent to the hallway, I should say, so out of the line of sight of the door. But the glass was shot out, and so I was kind of peering over, kind of waiting for his hand to come in and open the handle, because it could have been done very easily. So we were sort of backed up against the wall, and when I saw the glass shatter, I was just looking at the ground, and I saw bullet casings there. Then I looked around the room to see if anyone was hit in my room, and everyone was over by me.
Okay.
Then I heard shots go down the hallway, more than I can even count or, tell you. But they started getting more faint and more faint as he was shooting down the hallway.
Okay. And then what?
It got quiet, and I don't know how much time passed, but I heard crying and screaming from the middle of the hallway, a young man's voice screaming, "Help me, help me." And, we couldn't open the door.
Right. Right. Did you ever learn who that voice belonged to?
Anthony Borges.
Okay. Before you evacuated your class, how many students, Ms. Lapel, did you have in your class?
About 38,
Okay. And do you have any idea how many you had in your class
probably about 20,
afterwards?
right?
Okay. All right. Right now, I'm going to show you a video, and you tell me who these participants are, or these people are in this video, okay? Is that okay?
Yes.
So once again, pretty harrowing testimony from Stacy Lapel. She was in room 1255. She's an MSD teacher. She describes the moments hearing the gunfire. Initially, they evacuated, unlike some of the other teachers that we've heard from. And then she brought the students back inside, and that's when she heard more noises, more gunshots, and she says she saw the shooter walking towards her.
As she described it, they heard the fire alarm, they were evacuating, following protocol. They got up to the stairwell, and it was just an impasse, and then everybody heard something, started moving backwards. She tried to get the students in a room, had the door open to let as many of them in as she could, and that's when she described looking out into the hallway and seeing Cruz and describing his rifle as a long and black rifle. Shut the door, got shot as she was shutting the door.
She said she felt some sort of feeling in her shoulder, and then it was hot. It was a pang, and then it was hot. She still wasn't sure what was going on. And her classroom, keep in mind, was right next door to Scott Beagles, who you know is a teacher who lost his life that day.
And, she saw his door open as well.
And so they are watching video. Let's take a listen.
you stop it for a second? In that yellow circle, who is that?
That's me.
Okay, thank you. Stop it for a second. See the yellow circle now?
Yes,
Who is that?
that's Scott Beagle.
Okay. Okay. Do you know who Meadow Pollock was? Or-
Yes,
Who is she?
she was my student.
Okay, was she in your classroom during the fourth period of February 14, 2018?
Yes, she was.
Okay. You're on to play the video for Meadow Pollock.
Okay.
This side, please.
So we believe that the first video that they looked at was surveillance video that's already been entered into evidence. They were showing her an image with a yellow circle around it. She identified that first as herself, and then there was another image. That was Scott Beagle, the teacher next door.
And they were going through, the video of what she just testified to, the exit from her classroom, coming back into her classroom, trying to close her door, the classroom next door, where that victim was, have the door open, and that's, circled him in the doorway there. They're now looking at either another exhibit that they want to publish or another video that they're going to be publishing, and defense is raising their objection as to whether or not this witness can view and narrate what they're going to see in the next set of pictures.
She was asked if she knew who Meadow Pollock was, and she says, yes, she was my student. Meadow Pollock, one of the students who was a senior at the time, who was killed that day. And so, looks like maybe they're taking their...
No, they're just switching
No,
headsets.
they're just switching
Somebody's wasn't
headsets.
working.
Gotcha.
But it appears he referred to it as the Meadow Pollock video, so this must be surveillance video that captured what happened to her at the time of her death.
All of these teachers, again, today recounting what happened that afternoon. Once again, this is Stacy Lapel. She is a creative writing and an English teacher. We also heard earlier from Ronit Rayoven. She was an advanced placement teacher. She was describing her work, sort of doing triage to some of these students. We also heard earlier today from Julietta Matlock. She was a teacher in room 1215. That was study hall. And then, of course, earlier today, then we heard from Ivy Seamus. She was that social studies teacher who was teaching history of the Holocaust. All of these teachers describing what happened, and again, part of the state's arguments for these aggravating factors.
And then to the extent that they go on to talk about what they saw and what they felt and what they're feeling now, the state's position is that goes to the weight of what the jury is going to consider when they look at all these different aggravating factors.
And of course, there are statutory aggravating factors, and one is, disruption of a public event, which is school, or a public official, which
Correct.
in other words is a teacher.
Correct. And so that's what's taking place, during the narrative of what's going on. It certainly satisfies that aggravating factor. You heard the defense talk about, we'd stipulate to the aggravating factor that he's already pled guilty to the homicides, to the attempted murder charges. That may be what they want to do on behalf of their clients, to minimize the effect of the testimony that's going to come in, but the state's still entitled to add additional facts and witnesses with regard to each of these aggravating factors. And that's what they're doing. That's what they've been doing and what they will continue to do throughout the next set of days and weeks as they lead up to this. They want to give the jurors enough evidence that they can consider and find these 7 aggravating factors beyond a reasonable doubt, and then enough weight to each of these factors that they find at least one, if not more, as to each of the 17 victims who were killed during the course of the shooting. And so that's why they keep introducing all this testimony.
And theoretically, we still could hear from more students who were injured because, as you remember, Nikolas Cruz pleaded guilty to 17 counts of attempted murder. And so we have heard from the majority of those victims who have been injured in some ways. The last couple of days, we've heard about gunshot wounds. We've heard about graze wounds. We've also heard from students who have talked about how their lives are still being affected by those wounds. And at one point, of course, as you know, the defense had an objection to that, saying, hey, this is too much. We already know that he shot them. He pleaded guilty to it, but the judge eventually sided with the state on that.
And now the technology that's been helping them and avoiding having to excuse the jury doesn't appear to be working. And so they may very well just excuse the jury, and
so that they can have this sidebar conversation.
Technical difficulties. I'm going to ask you to just step out in this hallway. Shirley, just keep them right here while we deal with sidebar in a the old-fashioned way.
So the big question now is, when the jury's there and they've got those headsets out and they play the white noise, it's so that the jury doesn't hear what they're talking about. Now that they've excused the jury from the room, the question becomes whether she puts on the white noise so we don't hear what they're talking about, or whether we're going to hear the sidebar.
Mr. Secor, I'm going to ask that you make all of your objections now so that we don't have to keep stopping before each, because they're renewed objections, but a lot of the substance you're having to repeat, or you are repeating for each one. So if you can just make a general objection to each video as far as the 9403 and the cumulative, and then if you want to say the specific amount of times that you believe things are shown, why don't you go ahead and do that now for each video so that we don't have to keep breaking up every witness testimony.
Okay. Hang on just 1 second, please.
While we're waiting for him to get his place, so what she's asked him to...
I just want to agree that the state will allow these objections to constitute contemporaneous objections when they publish the individual
Well, then
videos.
all you have to say is over our continued objection, as stated on the record, and then we don't have to use these dreadful headphones and have all these issues, because they seem to be working less and less as the days go on.
We don't have to go sidebar for every time they want to object, they just put it on the record because that's what they're doing.
Right, that's what I mean, but
Right.
that's why I'm asking for you to place your objection on the record now while the jury's out, and then you can just renew your objection at the time the evidence is offered or published.
I understand, Judge, we just don't want to waive any issues that may arise down the road that we didn't make
I
contemporaneous
don't think you'd be
objection.
waiving it. In fact, I don't know of any law that says you have to repeat every single grounds that you've already stated in order to preserve your objection. I think you can just say, over our renewed objection, and that's it. I don't think there's any law that says you have to repeat all of the same things every time. all of the same arguments every single time. If you are, I'm happy to review the law, but I think that what you're doing is plenty to preserve your objections. Dave, do you agree?
No, for this, I agree with what you said, but what Mr. Secor is doing, and I'm not, laying any blame on anybody or saying they shouldn't do it, but he's also doing anticipatory objections that may come true or may not come true.
I agree.
Because, we're not necessarily going to show Ms. Lapel everything that he says we're going to, or any other witness. So, we don't have any objection to what you said, but the objection should be for what's going on, not what may happen in the future. That's my only concern.
And I just want to, I understand Mr. Satz's concern, and I just want the court to understand that I'm not at all trying to expand my objection improperly. I've received from the state what they say are the videos that they intend to introduce, and I have no way to base my objection on anything other than that. So I understand the concern, but I'm just operating under what I have, which is the only thing that I can operate on.
But if your objection is that by publishing a certain clip of a video to a jury, they will have seen person A being shot and person B being shot multiple times when there's not been any video of person A and person B being shot, then you're essentially making an objection to evidence that's is not even evidence. So, and the state is saying they may not even show that evidence, and I'm using the example of person A and person B because
I understand. And the reason that I'm renewing the objection is because the cumulative character of the evidence only arises when it's offered. And so that's why I feel the need to put on the record the amount of times that these scenes are shown, because before a video is put before the jury, then the cumulative argument is not the same. It changes every time. And so I'm not trying to interfere with the state's presentation of their case. I'm simply trying to preserve the record accurately as best as I possibly can. So I'm not trying to, again, somehow impede the state's presentation of their case.
And Your Honor, the defense, we have no problem if the defense wants to make a continuing objection without raising the number of times that they believe, not that the state believes, that they believe a victim has been shot. If they want to add the numbers up, if the defendant is sentenced to death and there's a brief in the Florida Supreme Court, the defense will have plenty of time to tally up those numbers from the record on appeal and put it in their initial brief. There's no reason to do it here. They can have an objection that they've already made and just raise it again.
I do want to add also that they bring up the video of Ashley Baez as an objection to Meadow Pollock video. Ashley Baez is on the first floor. It has nothing to do with accumulating Meadow Pollock's video. These are separate victims, separate floors. And the defense brought up Coyer, Martin Duque. Those are first floor victims. We're on the third floor now. There's no cumulative other than the timeline that was presented.
I guess the point that I'm trying to make is I've already denied the defense motion to eliminate, so I did say that you could go sidebar to preserve your objection, but what you're doing is you're repeating and continuing the objection, and it's taking, I don't think it's necessary. I've already denied the motion. The video is in evidence. So what's in evidence can be published to the jury. If you want to have a continuous objection, that's fine. You can state that on the record, but to go sidebar and have you make the argument over and over and over again, I just don't think it's necessary.
And believe me, I certainly don't enjoy making the argument over and over again. I just want to make clear the reason that I'm doing it is because the cumulative argument changes when a video is shown to the jury. That's the reason that
I understand what you're saying, but you're not just limiting it to that. You are making the entire argument over again, each and every time. And we have 17 videos. I don't need to hear all of the other arguments. You said you were simply going to go sidebar and tell me what you thought exactly was different and that what would be shown to the jury on multiple occasions, but we're going way beyond that.
Yeah, and my understanding was that the court wanted me to make all of my objections, so I was going to go through each of the videos, but I have it in a document, and I can submit it in writing if the court would prefer, and that way.
Didn't you already do that in your motion limiting?
No, the motion limit did not actually have the descriptions in the way that I have them in this document. It had some brief descriptions that were non-specific because I didn't want to file them publicly, but for purposes of judicial economy, I can put these descriptions and the counts as the defense perceives them in a document, and I can simply reference that when the state wants to show a video, and Your Honor can rule based on that. And I think that would speed up the process. I think it preserves the issue. I just believe that I need to contemporaneously raise that briefly and have Your Honor rule on it before the video is shown.
And Your Honor, the state objects to the defense filing a pleading in writing as to their supposedly contemporaneous objections. It's not contemporaneous if they're going to file an after-the-fact pleading that maybe you give them a week or 2 or 3 or 4 or 6 to put something together and do it after the fact. This is a proceeding that's going on now. They've made their objections. You've ruled on it, Your Honor. All they have to do is say continuing objection. That's all that has to happen. This doesn't have to be dragged out. They don't have to do anything in writing to preserve their appellate arguments. It's preserved. I understand they don't want to object in public to every photograph that's coming in, but that's the procedure, Your Honor. If they want to preserve their arguments for appeal, just have them object. They don't have to count up how many times they believe that this court is making an error and allowing this in. There are 34 victims in this case with numerous injuries. Yes, there's going to be a lot of photographs, and there are videos. And we see the pandemonium on the 3rd floor. There's going to be videos of that. All they have to say is continuing objection.
I agree. For purposes of preserving your appellate rights, a continuing objection is sufficient. Okay, is there anything else?
No, I wasn't asking for any time to put together anything for the court. I don't know why that came up. That's not what I was asking.
Okay, but the point is, I've already denied your motion in limine. I have reviewed all of the videos previous to today and yesterday, and I have found them to be relevant and other things, among other things. So you can preserve your objection by simply saying over the defense renewed objection. But we don't need to go sidebar every time and rehash all of the specifics in order for you to preserve your objection for appeal, okay? Thank you.
Your Honor, we'll abide by the court's ruling, but it's the defense's opinion that we should be able to preserve the appellate record the way that we believe that we should be able to do it. We believe that the court is limiting our access to the record, but we will certainly abide by the court's ruling. We'd also like to remind the court that on 2 separate occasions, we asked for a hearing outside of the presence of the jury so that we could hash through all of these issues and not interrupt testimony before every witness to have to go through all of this. So we will certainly do what you want us to do, but it's the defense's position that you are limiting our access to the record for the purposes of appeal.
Okay, respectfully, I disagree. Let's bring the jury in, please. Thank you.
So this was almost sort of a housekeeping issue. There was an issue with those headsets, and so the jury was called out, and then that's when the judge basically said, hey, listen, this is taking a whole lot of time. Your objections, the defense's objections to every piece of video that's being entered.
And they have a right to object.
Sure.
They need to do it contemporaneously at the time that the piece of evidence is going to come in, or they haven't preserved their right. We've talked about that. They've talked about that the whole time.
They want to have a record of those objections.
Right. The judge is just trying to streamline it because it turns out that their objection is virtually the same each time they make the objection. They cite to a rule of evidence and say why they're objecting to it, and then the judge overrules their objection and allows it in. She just wants to put a process in place so that they will simply say, any objection defense? And the defense will say, yes, we renew our continuing objection. And she'll say, fine, overruled, and then move on so they don't have to keep taking a break.
The jurors are present, everyone may be seated, Mr. Scott, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And all of this started after they spoke about evidence of Meadow Pollock.
Correct, they were going to play that video.
Hold it for a second. Who is that in the yellow circle?
It's nothing.
Oh, pardon?
We can't see anything on our screens. Now we can. Can you, ma'am? Can you see that?
Yes.
Can everybody see?
That's
No.
black.
Now it's gone again.
You okay now? Everybody's good? You see it, Ms. LaPel?
Yes.
Okay. And who's in the yellow circle?
That's Meadow Pollock.
Okay. And can you see who that yellow circle was?
Yes, that was Meadow Pollock.
Okay. Okay, Joaquin Oliver, do you know who he is?
Yes.
Was he in your class also?
Yes, he was.
Okay. Your Honor, I'd like permission to publish this.
You may.
Same objection pursuant to DMIL 12 in the court's ruling regarding preservation.
Thank you.
Who's in the yellow circle?
That's Joaquin Oliver.
Okay, Ms. LaPel, I want to show you State's Exhibit Mark Z for identification. Can you tell me who that is?
That's Meadow Pollock.
And State's Exhibit 4J, can you tell me who that is?
That's Scott Beagle.
And State's Exhibit 4K,
That's Joaquin Oliver.
and State's Exhibit X,
That's Chris Hickson.
and State's Exhibit Y.
That's Aaron Weiss.
Your Honor, I'd like to offer the evidence. State's Exhibits Z, 4J, 4K, X, and Y.
Is there any objection?
No, ma'am.
Okay, states X for identification will be received as states 68. States Y for identification will be received as states 69. States Z as in zebra for identification will be received as states 70. States 4J as in John will be received as states 71. And states 4K will be received as states 72.
Your Honor, may I publish these photos, please?
You may.
And this is State's Exhibit, sorry, Ms. LaPel, State's Exhibit 70. That is,
The picture is really, I mean, I know who it is, but it's hard to see the picture. Yeah. That's Meadow Pollock.
okay. And State's Exhibit 71.
Scott Beagle.
State's Exhibit 72.
Joaquin Oliver.
State's Exhibit 68.
Chris Hickson.
And State's Exhibit 69.
Aaron Weiss.
Okay, I'd like to play for you Christopher Hickson with the court permission.
The surveillance
Video, yeah.
video.
And new objection pursuant to DMIL 12 and the court's ruling regarding preservation.
Okay. Over the defense objection, you may publish.
All right, I'm just, Your Honor, with the court's permission, play the beginning and then have the witness excused. There's no, after cross-examination.
Sure.
We're not going to have any questions, so whatever you want to
Okay,
do.
so can we start it and then Ms. LaPel can leave and,
Sure.
okay. Do you know who that is?
Yes,
Who is that?
that's Chris Hickson.
Okay, can we pause it there, please? Ms. LaPel, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You can step down.
So that was Stacy Lapel. They are excusing her for right now, and she watched, and what was entered into evidence was more video. And you could see in her face she was looking intently at it, but then she was looking away at times.
Which is why they're letting her leave now. They took her up to a point where she identified somebody who was in the video, and then they're going to play the rest of the video for the jurors so they can see just what happened as the shots were fired.
And they needed her, once again, this is all what the state needs to do. She needs to properly identify those who were killed and those who were wounded. That's all part of the record.
Correct. Now it appears that they're showing the video to the jurors. Defense is watching, not the defendant. State watching as well.
And there was one point where the camera panned to those who were in the audience. Those are Scott Beagle's parents, the Dwarettes behind them. And at one point you could see some of the family members. You could see Max Schachter, even though his son was not involved in this particular piece of video, shaking his head because they know that what she was looking at was surveillance video of the gunman just absolutely unleashing terror on this school.
And they're powerful images, and the state has every right to show them to these jurors to establish the aggravating factors. We saw a little bit of now the streamlined procedure for the defense to object so they don't have to continually keep going to a sidebar. They renew their objection pursuant to a particular motion in limine that they filed, then the judge has overruled that objection, and then they're just raising it again so that the record is clear. They've made an objection to it at the time it's being published.
And that is standard for them to object, and they want to make sure that those are objections that are in the record for any appeal.
Correct.
Fred Guttenberg has been in the courtroom every day. At one point, you could see his wife looking at the ceiling, also just extremely sad, extremely uncomfortable as these videos were being shown. They don't see them. The gallery doesn't see the videos, but they could only imagine.
They know what's being shown. And, you know, we'll all find out later, once they let the press have access to it, exactly what was in those videos, what was in those pictures. The pictures that they don't object to and the pictures that he throws up on the screen there are those in-life pictures of the victims who have passed, and again establishes who they are for this jury to attach a face to the names that they keep hearing about.
And that's from reporting from our own Christina Vasquez, who is in the courtroom, and what she tells us is once the court is done for the day, they allow a certain number of reporters to witness some of the pictures and the video. They can take notes. They cannot take video so that they can report back. So Christina saw what was shown yesterday, and you're absolutely right. Some of the photos were those in-life photos of students. For example, Alex Schachter was in his band uniform. A picture that we've seen of him many times.
Mm-hmm. And again, they talked about it yesterday. The length of the surveillance video is about 15 minutes long. And so they're playing snippets now. They've zeroed in on particular victims and particular locations. And they're playing it again contemporaneously with a witness who testified about what took place at a particular location, what was going on in that classroom.
Still building that narrative for the state about what happened. Some of the victims in this video, Meadow Pollock, Joaquin Oliver, Scott Beagle, Chris Hickson, and Aaron Feiss. And during most of the time that this video is shown, the defendant, the shooter, Cruz, down with his head in his hands. And for those of you who are just joining us, the jurors each have their own screens, so they're able to watch along with everyone else on their own individualized screens so that they can really hone in on this video.
And keep in mind, once it's been admitted in evidence, depending upon what the procedure and protocol the judge is going to employ, if they want to see the evidence while they're deliberating, they'll figure out a way to let them see the evidence while they're deliberating.
Next witness,
Okay, go ahead.
Veronica Steele.
Well, the silence on that was just deafening, and that was the surveillance video that the jury was just seeing, presumably of Nikolas Cruz on his rampage inside the school. Now the next witness is being called. This is state's witness number 31.
And while we couldn't see the jurors looking at it, you could tell from the way that the members of the defense team and the prosecution were watching it, intense action taking place on the video, and you have to imagine that the jurors are as intense in their observation of this video as were the people who'd seen it before.
Correct.
Good afternoon. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. You can go ahead and have a seat. Please speak into the microphone, state your full name, and spell your last name for the record.
Veronica Steele, Steel.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ms. Steele. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Do you go to school?
Yes.
Where do you go to school?
Florida Gulf Coast University.
And what year are you in?
My sophomore year.
Sophomore year?
Yes.
Where'd you go to high school?
Douglas.
Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School?
Yes.
When did you graduate?
2021.
I'd like to call your attention to February the 14th, 2018. Remember that day?
Yes.
During fourth period, do you remember where you were?
Yes.
Where were you?
The third floor of the freshman building.
And what classroom were you in?
1257.
And whose classroom was that?
Mr. Beagle's class.
Scott Beagle?
Yes.
And what was Mr. Beagle teaching?
He was teaching government.
Government?
Yes.
Okay. And do you remember approximately how many students were in the class?
I believe around 18 to 20.
Okay. And did anything happen during that fourth period?
Yes.
What happened?
The fire alarm went off while we were doing some review for one of our exams.
Could you just lean in a little bit more
Yes.
to the microphone, please?
We were doing a review for some of our exams that we were going to do, and the fire alarm had gone off, and Mr. Beagle told us to start packing up all of our things and to start heading down the stairwell. We flooded into the stairwell,
And you were going to go down the closest stairwell?
yes, and
The
it
east
was
stairwell.
directly to our left.
Okay, the east stairwell, right?
Yes.
Okay.
When we left the classroom, the hallway was flooded with a lot of other kids from the other classrooms. So it was very packed. And before we were heading down the stairwell, it was like a rush of students that pushed back. And everyone got pushed back onto the walls and just a whole mess.
At that time, where were you?
I was directly outside of the classroom, in between the two rooms that were right next to each other. It was Beagle's class and Miss Lapel's class.
Okay.
So I was pushed in between right where that wall was. And then when we all got pushed back, it was just a whole like sort of emotions. We didn't know what was happening or why, we all just stopped and everything. And all of a sudden, a ton of kids started pushing backwards and running to the other side of the hallway. And you can imagine just like our emotions and everything. It was just all over the place. We didn't know what was happening or anything. And there was a teacher in the hallway that was yelling at everyone to stop running and to just calm down. But when more kids started running, we heard 7 shots go off in the hallway. And it echoed from the stairwell into the hallway. And from there, I almost got pushed into Lapel's class, but I pushed my way out and went back into Beagle's class. and ran with my classmates, and we ran in front of the desk and threw ourselves on the floor and had our backpacks shielding us. We didn't know if it was a drill or not, but we just wanted to like be safe because we were panicking and we didn't know what exactly was happening. So 7 shots going off that we heard, and then it just all went quiet, and everyone from the hallway just disappeared into either classrooms or they left. And the way I was laying on the floor, I was laying on top of my 3 other classmates that were there with me. And we were shielding ourselves with our backpacks, and we had a clear view of the door, and we noticed that the door wasn't closed. It was wide open.
The door, the classroom to your door.
Yes. And our teacher, Beagle, his body was partially inside of the classroom, and then his torso down was outside of the classroom. And his body was blocking the door and holding it open. So it was very, scary for us because we didn't know what to do. And with all of us like crying and, whispering to each other, it was pretty loud, I can say. Especially with our door open, it kind of echoed into the hallway.
Right.
So it was just a whole mess.
Okay, so what happened then?
Then we kind of just were laying there. We were texting our friends and family saying, we don't know what's happening. We think there's a shooter in here. We heard shots going off and everything. What's it called? My classmate, one of my classmates, her phone actually rang, and, she turned it off, and randomly her phone dialed 911. We don't know how. We just started hearing on her phone, 911, what's your emergency? And we didn't know how, maybe I don't know what happened. But then she ended up hanging it up because it was really loud. And we were just all laying there. We didn't know what to do. And we were kind of just staying in the same position until the police and the SWAT team came up to our room.
Okay. After Mr. Beagle fell into the doorway, did you hear any more shots after that?
No.
Okay, you were just hiding in the classroom?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you take any cell phone videos?
Yes, I did.
Okay, let me show you State's Exhibit Mark 4L for identification. Take this out. Show you this drive. You see your initials on it?
Yes.
So you recognize this?
Yes.
And you've watched this?
Yes.
And this is truly and accurately depict everything you took on your cell phone
Yes.
on February the 14th, 2018?
Yes.
Okay, Your Honor, I'd like to introduce you to evidence.
Is there an objection?
The objective is being pursued to DMI 12 and the court ruling regarding preservation.
Okay, thank you. Over the defense objection states Exhibit 4L, as in Lisa, for identification will be received as states 73.
I'm going to play 73 for you, okay?
Okay.
Is that the door to the classroom there?
Yes.
And is that Mr. Beagle lying there?
Yes.
Hey, look straight, look straight.
Look straight, look straight.
Move it all along. Right behind this classroom. Come on, guys. You guys are okay.
So those voices that you heard, they were the police coming?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Gill. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Any questions for the witness? Thank you, Ms. Excused.
Thank you.
Anthony Borges.
Wow, so this is the second time that we heard audio from some of this cell phone video, and boy, was this tough to listen to. You could hear some moaning, you could hear some voices.
You could hear the panic of the students who were around her, everybody trying to be quiet, the person who was injured crying out for help or moaning, whatever it was, and then the police entering, and you could hear the shuffling, the noise of everybody getting taken out of there, and another victim witness who had to relive what happened there.
Veronica Steele, she was in Scott Beagle's class. She talked about how they went back into the class. She was lying on top of classmates at that point. Everybody was shielding themselves with backpacks. As she's lying on top of her classmates, she says she sees Scott Beagle, who's the teacher, in the doorway trying to block that door because it wasn't closed at that point. And that's when the shooting and the terror was unleashed.
And the victims' families are all sitting there watching it and watching the reaction of the defendant as he's listening to it.
This is Anthony Borges, who's walking in right now. Anthony Borges was shot several times. He also was somebody who has been sort of hailed a hero for helping shield his classmates from also being in the doorway. Anthony Borges walking in. And I will say this is the first time we've seen him without crutches or some sort of aid. He has been very, very badly injured.
And he appeared to actually look across towards Cruz as he walked towards the witness stand.
Please speak into the microphone and state your full name, spell your last name for the record.
Anthony Borges, Borges.
Okay. Mr. Borges, are you working?
No.
Were you going to school?
Yes.
Where do you go to school?
Atlantic Technical College on Coconut Creek, doing
Okay.
automobile service.
Okay. Where'd you go to high school? Where did you go to high school?
Oh, where? No, I'm going to college.
No. But before you went to college, you went to high school, right?
No, I went to, I should change the program. I went to Richard School.
Okay. Did you ever go to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School?
No. I mean, I did, yes, I did. My freshman year.
I thought you did.
Yeah, for sure.
Scared me there for a minute, Anthony. When did you go to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School?
I actually don't remember.
You don't remember?
But that was way back.
Okay. All right. Do you remember February the 14th, 2018?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember what year you were in on February the 14th, 2018?
Freshman year.
You were a freshman?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to ask you about February the 14th, 2018. Fourth period. Remember that?
Yes.
Tell us what happened, okay?
So I was in the third floor on class personalization, 1250, I think. And I was just sitting down, the teacher just explaining about the finals exams and stuff like that. So I was just chilling, sitting, listening to music, and then I hear something weird, like a scream and like some echo. So I turned off the music, and then the alarm went on and then went off. and they went on again like 2 times. So everybody was confused. Everybody just get out of the class. There was like a lot of people in the hallway. Then I decided to go out down to the stairwell. That's when I saw the gun and just closed the door and started running.
Okay, then what did you do?
Then he shot me on my left leg, and then I saw this door like half open. Then I closed it, and then I just lay down there, waiting for everything to stop.
Okay, so what happened to you?
So then I got shot, everything got silent. I just look myself, check up on me. I look everything around me. There was a person in front of me. There was another person on the other side. I talked to that person to reach out if it was okay or anything, and she didn't respond. When I stopped talking to her, I just reached out my phone and I called my mom first. She didn't answer. I called my best friend. She didn't answer, and then I called my dad. So I told her everything, like goodbye and everything. I threw my phone because I didn't want the shooter just looking at me with the phone and shoot me again. So I just threw the phone.
Okay, when you were on the phone, where were you?
I was outside the classroom.
Yeah, were you standing?
No, I was shot. I was laying down in the hallway.
So you were laying in the hallway?
Yes.
Did you call for help or anything?
I did call, yeah.
Did you call in Spanish and English or just
Both, yes.
What were you yelling?
Help.
Help, help?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let me show you. State's Exhibit 4N for identification. Mr. Borges, and ask you, can you identify that?
Yeah, that's me.
And that's you?
Yes.
And that's accurate the way you were on February 14th,
yes.
2018?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce State's Exhibit 4N.
Is there an adjustment?
Move it.
Okay, states 4 and for identification will be received as states 74.
And Mr. Borges, tell us what happened. You were laying in the hallway and you were shot. How many times? Do you know how many times you were shot?
At that time, I didn't know. I just felt like one shot.
Right.
But I got 5 times. So
Pardon?
5 times.
5 times?
Yes.
Where were you shot?
And my leg, my other leg, and the back, and over
All right.
here in the arping.
All right. Can you show it to us?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Oh,
Back to
Yeah.
leg.
Okay.
This.
I don't know if there's yours on the other side, I can't see.
Why don't you come out in the front here, Mr. Borges? Right over here. Okay, thank you. And how many surgeries have you had?
14.
Okay. All right, thank you, sir. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
All right, thank you, sir, you're excused.
So that was Anthony Borges. He was a freshman at MSD. He was in room 1250. He heard the shots. He goes into the hallway. He says he sees the gunman and he shot. Initially, he said, well, I thought I was just shot one time. He was shot 5 times. And he just moments ago unzipped his jacket and we saw his scars. 14 surgeries, he says.
And again, this goes towards the callous disregard that Cruz had for his victims as he was running through the hallway, shooting at people, some of whom are now dead and others who he injured, and supports the state's aggravating factors. And to hear his testimony, again, has an impact on these jurors as to the effect that this shooting has had on the people that have died and the people that have survived.
And the survivors still living with scars and injuries. And Borges did not talk about this, and he wasn't asked about this, but he has said on record before that he had to have part of his lung removed. And he had a lot of rehabilitation because he wasn't walking properly for the longest time. This is the first time we've seen him walking without crutches or certain aids. So this is something that's had a long-term impact on a lot of these victims. And before we saw Borges, you know, we heard that video, and Nikolas Cruz had his fingers in his ear.
Couldn't even listen to the audio that was coming out.
This is the next witness, state's witness number 32, who is about to take the stand.
Good afternoon, sir. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. You can be seated. Please state your full name and spell your last name for the record.
Okay, my full name is Ernest Adam Rospierski. My last name is spelled Rospierski.
And what do you do for a living, sir?
Depending on who you ask, but very little. No, I'm a teacher at Selma Douglas High School.
Okay, and how long have you been a teacher?
I am going to be entering in my 11th year.
Okay, and what do you teach?
Students, weirdly enough. But what subjects do I teach?
Yes.
History. I teach AP European History, International Relations, and Geography.
Okay. I'd like to call your attention to February the 14th, 2018. Were you teaching on that day, sir?
Yes.
Okay. And where was your classroom?
In the 1200 building.
And what was the number of your classroom?
My classroom was 1249.
Okay. Let me show you State's Exhibit. It is remarked in evidence of Mr. Ostrowski as 67. This is a diagram.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see your classroom there?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to put it on this video here. And could you mark for us where your classroom was?
I'm guessing using my finger?
No, you're going to see. It comes up. It's and you can pick a color, and you can the number you were in.
Thank you. Ooh, which color? My wife's favorite color is blue, but my son's is red. That's my room.
Okay. And is that on the north side or the south side of the hallway?
It's on the south side.
Okay. And it's two classrooms from the west stairwell. Is that correct, sir?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So, fourth period, what were you teaching?
Fourth period was actually my personalization course,
Okay.
so I wasn't teaching anything. I was actually grading papers.
Okay.
It was the end of the day.
Could you tell us approximately how many students you had in your class, sir?
I want to say probably upper 20s, so I think 28 was on my roster.
Okay.
It's 4 years ago, so a couple thousand kids since then, so I want to say 28.
I understand. So, what happened during that fourth period, sir?
Well, I'm guessing you're asking towards the tail end of it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. Just for clarification, because up until then it was relatively boring, which was awesome. It was a normal Valentine's Day, so lots of kids being excited, lots of candy being bandied about, balloons and what have you. First thing, I'm sitting at my table grading, at my desk grading papers. I had a stack of tests that I had to get through because I wanted to, because they'd just taken them, so I was trying to get on top of that.
Right.
And then sitting in class, and I heard a fire alarm go off.
Okay.
So,
Go ahead. What did
follow normal fire procedure, get all the kids out, walk out of my room, and that's when I saw kids starting to walk towards the west stairwell, because that's our normal path, and then they all started coming back,
Right.
and I was unsure as to why. I started hearing what I thought were gunshots, at least whatever, so I wanted to go investigate. So that's when I walked to the west stairwell.
Were you familiar with guns?
I grew up in the state of Michigan, hunting, fishing, and doing all types of things.
All right.
So yes, I'm very familiar with them.
Okay, so that you recognize gunshots.
Yes,
Okay, so how did you respond? What did you do?
I went to investigate. I wasn't sure what was going on, so I couldn't see anything, but I definitely heard gunshots. So then I returned back in the hallway. I saw a very packed hallway, to say the least. as I'm sure that, I'm guessing some people have seen on video. And I tried to calm kids down and get them into the classrooms that they're supposed to go to. I walked towards them relatively calmly, saying, get back to your rooms, go to where you belong, please. And by the time I got to roughly my room, which directly across from there is the bathroom, actually directly across is the water fountains, but it's both bathrooms are right there. That's when the shooter came onto the floor. And that's when everyone thankfully ducked into rooms, and I pushed a bunch of kids who were in front of me into the little alcove outside of my door.
Okay, and then what happened, sir?
During that, at some point, I pushed them all into the door. I think there was 12-ish kids. I then stuck my head out real quickly to see what was going on. That's when I got grazed by the first bullet, because I got a graze on my face in this general area, and then I got another one on my hip that I didn't find till the next day, actually. And I tucked my head back. This all happened very quickly.
Right.
And then I looked out again. I saw the shooter had the gun up and away, because he was about 25-ish feet from my guesstimation. I then tried my neighbor's door, because I couldn't get into my room because my keys were in my room, because my bag was already packed to go home, and I forgot to grab them as I left.
Okay.
My neighbor's door was locked, so then I came back after trying her door once. I yelled at the kids to run, and then I took off down the hallway and held open the first door for the kids as they came through. After all my kids came through, at least I thought all my kids came through, I put my foot by the door to let them have time to get down. And after a relatively short amount of time, Kyle came by and it was scrambling down, and I didn't notice at the time, but he was injured.
You mean Kyle Lehman?
Kyle Lehman, yes.
Yeah.
And then I held the door after that. I kind of froze for a minute. And then somebody tried to push through. I thought it was a kid. Thankfully later I found out it wasn't. And then I waited, and I kind of got a hold of myself, and then I thought, okay, where can I go that I can lock a door? So I went down the second floor. There's a teacher lounge on the second floor. I know the door to the teacher lounge is usually kept unlocked, but I knew the bathroom could be locked. So that's where I went.
Okay. And you stayed on the landing and held the door for a while, didn't you?
Yes.
Okay. And when you were doing that, did you notice anyone that was lying on the...
There's a girl with dark hair. I thought it was Jamie, but I wasn't sure. I reached down and shook her, trying to get some sort of reaction. I got nothing. And that's when I decided to run. I didn't try and grab because, quite frankly, I didn't think I could do anything.
Okay. And that was Jamie Guttenberg?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Carol Logren, do you know who she is?
Yes, of course I do.
Was she in your class?
She was.
Okay. And how about Peter Wine?
Also in my class.
Also in your class. Okay. I'm going to publish this video, and you can identify yourself for us, would you?
Sure.
Your Honor, may we?
Sure.
No objection, proceed to DMIL 12 in the courtroom in the right position. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Do you see yourself there, sir?
I do.
I assume that's you in the maroon shirt?
That's a safe assumption. Oh, there I am. Now I'm walking out the door slowly. Ah, yes, that's me.
Okay.
Jeans, Stoma Douglas shirt. I think you guys still have.
All right. And what were you doing there, sir?
That's when I said I went to the stairwell to investigate the noise. That's what I was doing.
Is this you coming back?
Yep. And here comes all the kitties.
Is that when you're going to next door to try the
Mhm.
door, sir?
That is correct.
This is the other angle. Is that Kyle Lehman?
I believe so, yeah.
And is that when you said you were checking Jamie?
Yes.
And you were standing there when he did that, right?
Yes.
Bless you. And that's when you're going to the second floor to the restroom?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And how long did you stay there?
I honestly couldn't tell you the length of time I was there. It did not seem very long, but police officers came through and cleared the outside room.
Okay.
I heard them, and then that's when I,
Left.
well, after they left the room, I exited a little bit after that, and thankfully the first person I saw was a BSO officer who I knew from working games at school, and he looked at me and said, "What are you doing in there?" I said, "Hiding."
Okay. So, and then you...
Then I made my way downstairs and had a bunch of people in very nice uniforms pointing large guns at me.
I want to show you State Exhibit 4Y for identification. Do you recognize that person?
Yes,
Who is that?
it's Claire. Kara.
Carol Ogren?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd like to offer State's Exhibit 4Y.
Okay.
States Exhibit 4Y for identification will be received as States 75.
And I'm going to show you a video, and could you tell us if you see Carl Ogren, please?
Subject to objection pursuant to D and 912 of the court's rule regarding preservation. Thanks.
Okay, so noted, thank you.
Do you see Carol Ivan?
Yes, the circle indicated her.
Okay. And that surrounding the yellow circle?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Mr. Ostrowski, thank you. I want to show you State's Exhibit 5A, sir, and ask you, can you identify who this is?
Yes,
Who is it?
it's Peter Wine.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to call for State's Exhibit 5A.
Is there any objection? State's Exhibit 5A for identification will be received as State's 76.
And I'd like you to watch this video and please identify Mr. Wang if you can. Mr. Ostrowski, is that okay?
Sounds fun.
I would renew my objection pursuant to DMIL 12 and the court to remove public preservation. Thank you.
Okay, your objection is noted for the record. Thank you.
Circled in yellow, was that Mr. Wang?
I believe so.
Can you see him now?
Yes,
Is that Peter Wang?
I believe so.
Show you State's Exhibit marked 4Z. Mr. Rasputin. Do you recognize who this is?
Yes,
Who is that?
it's Jamie Guttenberg.
Okay, was she in your class?
She was.
All right, I'd like to, Jamie Guttenberg, please, Mr. Course Commissioner.
Is there any objection?
Yes, pursuant to DMI of 12, as well as the court preservation ruling. Oh, I'm sorry, that was just a photo? I'm sorry, I thought it was a video. No objection to the photo.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm going to publish the video too, so.
Okay, well, let's deal with one thing at a time. 4Z as in zebra for identification is a photo, and it will be received without objection as states 77.
I'm going to play the video. You want to?
So you're not publishing the photo, but you want to play the
No.
it's in evidence?
I was going to, I'm going to publish them first. Okay, you're right.
Okay.
I forgot.
I was just asking, you can do whatever you want.
No, it's okay. And you previously identified State's Exhibit 75 as Carol Ogren?
Mhm.
Sorry. Correct, Mr.?
Yes.
State's Exhibit 76 is Peter Wang.
Yes,
And State's Exhibit 77, Jamie Guttenberg, right?
yes.
All right, thank you, Your Honor. We'd like to publish this video.
Okay,
Object to DMIL 12, as well as the court preservation ruling. Thank you.
okay, your objection is noted with regard to the surveillance video. Thank you.